Looks can certainly be deceiving. Hi guys, Greg Howe, S9 Radio. And for those of you considering the online purchase of a vintage piece of electronics, I know it's easy to fall for lots of pretty pictures of the exterior, but it's oftentimes the not so pretty pictures of the interior that are the important ones. So anyways, you can see the outward appearance of these Browning Mark IIIs isn't too terribly bad. So the owner and I proceeded to pop the covers, and right away, our attention's drawn to this rusted out high voltage transformer and all kinds of other corrosion on the chassis, speaker all rusted out, big old rust spots here and there. Pretty rough shape, to be quite honest. We've already got aluminum oxide starting to eat through the capacitor cans. As they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words, or quite possibly $1,000 in this case, if you were to consider the purchase price and then the cost of bringing these back into a reliable working condition. To encourage sellers to provide some interior shots, let them know they'll probably want to lift the covers anyways, ensuring the safe arrival of the collectible they're selling, as to properly ship and package just about any vintage vacuum tube electronics. The covers need to be lifted. Some sort of packing material such as newspaper, bubble wrap, tissue paper needs to be wedged under the covers, ensuring the vacuum tubes don't vibrate out of their sockets during transit. Otherwise, they may be on the hook for some sort of a damage claim, possibly having to refund the purchase price of the radio and totally having to eat the cost of the round-trip shipping if they want the radio back. Not a good thing. Before I dive into any type of service work, I always like to know a little background, a little history of the item I'm working on. That's not always possible with online purchases, as many of the items are acquired through estate sales, yard sales, and whatnot. But most good collectors have a way of determining whether a particular item is high or low mileage. In the case of CB radios, the channel selector is an excellent indicator. Does the channel selector change channels with authority and have good detent, or is it loose and sloppy? And for the online folks, see if you can't zoom in on the channel selector, looking for visible signs of wear on both the knob and the surface behind it, looking for decades of gunk buildup, all good indicators of a radio that's seen lots of use. Keep in mind, many operators just park it on one channel and leave it there and seldom spin the dial. So let's move on to the volume control. And of course, any visible wear of the silk screen is a dead giveaway of a high mileage radio. I'm seeing some scuffing on the volume control knob that's not quite as prevalent on the other knobs, indicating a fair amount of use on this radio. And then there's some other small tells. So next you want to look at the relay, and you look for pitting and burning of the contacts. And if you're seeing that, yeah, chances are the item's somewhat high mileage, although most of the relays can be cleaned or replaced. It's just useful information to know. Another great indicator is whether the item has original light bulbs. This does not. Browning used frosted light bulbs. So that tells me this radio's got some hours on it to burn out the original light bulbs. Let's look at the channel indicator. Ooh, okay, so not only have the light bulbs been replaced, the replacement light bulb is even high mileage, and you can see you got some burn time on it. Let's look at the receiver. Okay, another replacement bulb, very dirty. So yeah, this, the meter, same thing, bulb replaced. Now here's one on Brownings that's almost never replaced. And if this bulb's been replaced, you've got a really high mileage item. As Browning used frosted light diffusing bulbs, you can see this transmit indicator light that only comes on during transmit is an original frosted Browning bulb. So that's a good sign. That means this radio or this pair is not extremely high mileage, assuming that they are a matching pair. Okay, so that's a little bit on the radio's electronics, but one can learn a bit just by looking at the fasteners that hold the covers on, providing they're original to the radio. Are there any burrs or tooling marks indicating the fasteners have ever been removed? If not, the likelihood of the radio being virgin and unmolested is just greatly increased. On the flip side, if the fasteners look like this, the odds of the radio being high mileage, or worse yet, the possibility of it being a problem child or owned by a golden screwdriver whatever, with the covers being constantly on and off, has greatly been enhanced. So having a better idea of how much usage a piece of vintage electronics is actually seen is extremely beneficial to myself from a technical standpoint, and once again, extremely important to prospective buyers. In the case of these Brownings, these radios are nearing 50 years old. They use carbon-based potentiometers for many of the controls. I can almost guarantee you over the lifespan of this radio, these controls have never seen a service, any lubrication. The volume control gets one hell of a workout on high mileage radios and is almost certainly due for replacement. It will have noise. Chances are when you turn it down, it doesn't completely mute the radio. These things wear out. And there's quite a few potentiometers. You've got the mic gain controls, the bias, the S meter adjustments. And this is not my first Browning flood victim restoration. I actually did a pair of Brownings, I believe they were from the Hurricane Katrina area, several years back, that were actually much worse than this, and I had great success with that restoration. But I wanted to point out, this is a lot more than just aesthetic rust and cosmetic damage. There are a lot of things going on here to the untrained eye, and I'm going to point out a few, such as this receiver main tuning capacitor. Even with multiple treatments of deoxit contact cleaner, I had to replace the tuning capacitor in the Hurricane Katrina radio because it was frequency hopping. It would just jump 10 channels all by itself, and after replacement, everything stabilized. And things like this speaker almost certainly need replacement. The voice coil is almost for sure rusted out, which has the potential to take out this audio transformer. God forbid you need a meter, which is easily damaged by water. They're not cheap. And then, of course, the tube sockets and the tubes. And I can pretty much assure you the tube sockets really need replacement. But the radio is basically a total at that point. It's such a laborious task to go through and replace all the tube sockets. And the contact cleaners, once the radios are this far gone, they really don't do much. You can get in there with an X-Acto knife and scrape out each socket hole. I've done that before. That helps. But don't think contact cleaner is going to, save your day. It's not. And these tubes have such bad corrosion on the pins, even though many of them are probably still viable, rather than the task of trying to get those all polished and cleaned up and trying not to break the vacuum of the tube. I think replacement's an easier way to go on that. And then moving over here to the transmitter, you can see the whole channel selector and the crystals have got a greenish tinge, and so do the crystal sockets. So we've got some corrosion going on there. This is a very low level signal that comes off the channel selector. So any type of corrosion is going to create some erratic, intermittent operation. Once again, once they're this far gone, don't count on any of the contact cleaners or treatments doing much for you. It's just something you're going to have to live with. And then things like the relays, if they've filled up with water, a good idea to replace those because the coil's probably going to short out if it's not already, and that can cause other problems within the radio. So those are a few of the things that one needs to consider when getting a radio that's had some major exposure to water. So now what? What do you do with this salty old pair of rust buckets? Do you part them out? Do you send them to the radio graveyard like I'd advise most of you to do? Do you kick them to the curb on trash day? Nah. I love a good challenge. I'd much rather hear these back on the airwaves than seeing their parted out carcass on eBay. So much like an ER surgeon, I'm going to dive into a marathon session attempting to restore a pulse and seeing what else it's going to take to get these back into a workable condition. So I've recapped the radio, so that's not a concern powering it up. However, these high voltage transformers certainly are, especially with the amount of rust I'm seeing. So I made sure that there was a 2-amp fuse installed, and of course there wasn't. It was a 4-amp fuse. The mode switch was good. I guess other than the new capacitor replacement, the biggest part of this restoration was replacement of the speaker with a nice replica. As the old speaker actually had a short the voice coil to ground that was causing some issues. And for late model Mark IIIs with the ALC control, these things are making some damn good power. Somebody had strapped one of the resistors. They were making well over 10 watts. Now they're right where I like to see them. We're looking into a Bird Tourmaline dummy load. and a little over 4 watts. Swinging to almost 5, and these are old Browning tubes I put in the audio circuit. The finals and everything are all new, but I'm sure once I put some stronger modulators in there, we'll get a little more forward swing. And I don't even have the mic gain opened wide open, but this is the longest key up this radio's seen so far. I didn't expect any snap, crackle, pops. Just about everything that should be replaced has been replaced, but at least she's holding in there, not dropping out on me due to corrosion issues. So there you go, Jeremy. Remember these things? Well, they're up and running. Hey, 458, you still out here listening? Hey, you're the first one to respond to these old Brownings. I don't think they've been fired up in about 30 years. First on-air key up, first cue. So these things sounding okay?
Oh, yeah, it sounds good on here on my end. Sounds real clear.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you. Hey, Blue Chip, you out here listening? Wiki Whack, Big Bear Mountain calling.
That damn 212 got my ears. He think he talking to number 4. It's Kokomo. But I got this damn stick on Kokomo and
sounding really good.
Right there.
New speaker. Got about 90 microfarad of ping capacitance. Hey, Blue Chip, Wiki Whack, Big Bear Mountain, SoCal calling. Blue Chip, you on frequency? Hello.
Bye, 2K, King David said bye.
Okay, as shown, I've got these dirty birds up and running, working well. So I guess they're worthy of a little cosmetic restoration. But I should also point out it took a lot more than just electrical rehab to get these radios up and running. All of the controls were completely locked up and frozen. The bias control, the mic gain control, the carrier balance control, the ALC control. So frozen that you might even be able to see some of the expansion of this slot. Even with a big screwdriver, I couldn't break this thing loose. So I got in there with a little keg Pro Gold. This is an electronic lubricant, and was able to get everything freed up. And then, of course, all the controls got a treatment of F5 fader lube. I advise against using contact cleaners such as D5, Deoxit. They strip the controls of their lubricant. Lucked out. The meters are moving. I really expect the meter movements to be all frozen up. You can see it spent so much time underwater. It actually blackened the trim rings just due to dissimilar metals. I know it looks like somebody painted these. I guarantee you they did not. This is electrolysis. It blackened that metal. As you can also see, it stripped a lot of the patina off the Golden Eagle right down to the copper base, the plate that they put over the base metal. So yeah, these are, we'll call these seabirds. Anyways, thanks for watching. I've got a big smile on my face. Like I say, this isn't the worst set I brought back, but certainly in the top 5, and always nice to save some Browning Golden Eagles from the graveyard.